Hi, I'm Theo, and these broadcasts are to support the blogs on nomoreshee.com's website as well as the online classes. In this episode, part 3 in our series on the Canon. Welcome back to the No More She broadcast, where we continue our discussion on the Canon in part 3 and pick up where we left off in the first session, discussing how the Canon came to be. The key character that we need to bring up from the early church is Marcion. So he's born around 75 with the Common Era and died around 155 with the Common Era. And he had a view that there were two gods, the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament. He rejected the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, and any portions of Judaism, and he made an early closed canon. He was the first one that started making a canon, and because of him and his decision, and he, did not include all the Gospels, only portions of Luke that he found suited him, and that's it, portions of Luke, not even all of Luke. And he accepted Paul. He pretty much decided, this is what I think is the Bible, and because he did it and pushed it and was quite popular and gained quite widespread influence, but he was just one man. And so that's when the church began to decide that they're going to have to decide on a canon. And because these other books were starting to come in and Marcion was cutting out books, and so this is when the discussions arose. And there's great debate, but if you check the actual councils and the history, you're going to find that they did vote. Representatives of the entire church did vote, but it wasn't close votes. There was only Marcion maybe and another dissenter. There wasn't that much dissension. Very slim minority that dissented in these votes. The majority of people that use the Bible as their primary source of God's word, where you have, like I said, Islam or Mormons that use something else, so we don't include them in these discussions. You can see that the majority have decided on a certain set of books that are the primary, and the Protestant what it has. So in summary, then, the Hebrew Bible canon, then of course you have the law, the prophets, and the writings. And then you have Roman Catholicism, and they're having 73 because they include these deuterocanonical books. And so this is an example. We're not going to do everyone here, but this is, among like Roman Catholicism. And if you go back to the previous portions of this video, you'll see what the different traditions had. But this gives you like a bird's eye view of everything. So, and they have extra portions of Daniel, obviously, that are not in necessarily a typical Protestant Bible. And some of these other deuterocanonical books that they find valuable and they include it as a part of their canon. And then the Old Testament, obviously, by Christians, which is the typical 66 books, just as the Old Testament. And of course, the New Testament's not argued. And so you can go back through the previous. So I just want to touch upon some dates here and try to fan things out using this 7 events that greatly affect the New Testament world here. And you have in 323 BCE, you have the death of Alexander the Great, and then his kingdom that he united everybody in Hellenism split into 4 parts. And so that's a very important date. And then around 250 BC is a process that we've been talking about, translating the Hebrew scriptures to Greek. It begins, and it's going to go all the way into the 1st century. And that's important. So that needs to be understood. You have the rededication of the Jerusalem temple in 164, and that's the time of the Hasmonean period when one of those 4 of Alexander's kingdoms that broke into 4 parts, one of those 4 parts, one of their leaders, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, caused such problems that the Jews mounted guerrilla warfare and was able to overthrow, and for about 1 century was able to be free. But then Rome is able to then reoccupy Judea in 63 BCE. Again, as we just give rough estimates because there's lots of debate on some of these debates, but rough estimate, the crucifixion of Jesus obviously is a very important date, and it's around 30 is a good date just to put there and let all the arguments of everyone do what they do with that, but that gives you a rough estimate. Now, About 20 years later, after his death, they've been doing all this orally, but then they start realizing the need because one of the Acts chapter 12, one of the apostles is killed. So, they start seeing the need for writing things down. And in the 60s, you're going to see like James, the brother of Jesus, who took over leadership of the church, Paul, Peter, a number of people died. And of course, the destruction of the temple in 70. So at that point, you're going to see writings, and some people are going to push the writings on into about 130 of the New Testament text. Not everybody's in agreement there, so again, this is a roughly. Many are going to push it back and keep it in the first century of when these texts were actually written, but they are pretty much in circulation by that time period. And then I wanted to show you this, the process of closing the New Testament canon was in 397. So councils met, they discussed over time, and it was pretty much agreed upon. And they're just basically taking the consensus view that most everyone agreed. There was a few that were some minor disagreements here and there, but the vast majority then decided to close the New Testament canon. And again, the Old Testament canon we just briefly surveyed, and the only difference is these deuterocanonical works that the Jews did not accept, therefore many Protestants don't accept, but then these other books that some traditions within accepted, depending on how they received it, because these are different traditions of Christianity that geographically are in different parts of the Christian world at that time. Obviously, Ethiopia is vastly different than Rome in Italy. They're two different parts of the world. And then Antioch is another different part of the world. And so they have their different traditions and different reasons for accepting different books into their canon. This is what we mean by canon, and this is what we mean that certain groups found certain books to be quite influential in the history of their people and their beliefs, and they chose to continue to keep them in their canon, and others did not find them as suitable. And so, but the vast majority of the Bible, the typical Bible that is talked about for the most part, is the 66 books, 39 in the Old, or the Hebrew scriptures of the 39. And again, the Hebrew, I didn't say this, but I guess I'll go back real quick to that. But going with the Hebrew, they have only 24. And that's because you'll see here they combine all 12 in one scroll. So they change the numbering systems, okay? So that's all. So they're just combining that. Of course, Samuel has 2, and Kings has 2, but the 12 is 12, so and you combine Ezra and Nehemiah into one, scroll. So that's how they get it down to 24. And some traditions within Judaism get down to 22 to match the Hebrew alphabet by, again, consolidating and conflating some of these, So you have different ones that they can tie different books together. And so that's how they're able to do that. They're able to group certain books together, but it's still the Jewish 24 and the Protestant 39 are the same. They're just in a different order. The ordering is different, and in the Jewish, they just combine them. So there's not much difference otherwise. But it's interesting. You'll find when people are trying to understand the meaning of a text, when you have Ruth down here, it can have a different meaning. Why Ruth is placed so much later. And it's tied to these 5 scrolls, which is tied to certain festivals in the Jewish religion, their understanding, their festivals. So Ruth is down here, where in the Protestant canon is back up here. And so when you see Ruth up here, you're going to have a way of interpreting it that may be different than if you have Ruth appearing later as a part of the writing. So that is just something interesting. And so Ruth is often placed up here in the Protestant because it's believed to be that time period. And so that's why it's reflecting a time that's the time of the judges. Ruth occurs during the time of the judges, so it's in the Protestant canon moved up. And so it's interesting when you read or study commentaries, and they'll pull out meanings different based on where you might place the book in the canon. And that might mean, this is what it could mean for a person to place the book in this part of the canon as opposed to the other. So that's what's quite interesting. And so that's why I wanted to show you these different listings, so you get a very good idea of how it's done. But the Jewish and Protestant canon are pretty much identical. It's just the ordering and then the grouping of the books that cause it. And even the Jews, again, they do the same thing. They have 22, but they just conflate more books together because they want to organize it, measure it. Again, it's the same distance, right? Whether you have meters or feet or yards, or kilometers or miles. It's the same distance. You're just using a different measuring system. And then, of course, like I said, the other traditions that have these extra books and what you do with those and how authoritative you allow them to be. I believe that it's God's people and that it wrote these, and followers of Yahweh that wrote these. And whether you choose to include them in your canon or not, that's just up to your tradition and up to how you understand things. But I still think they're all valuable because they offer something, insight into how God's people throughout their history and going through all these things we discussed from the time of Alexander, whatnot, how all these things do affect the people of God in these periods like the Second Temple period. Hopefully you'll find this a little bit fascinating. Thank you very much, and God bless you for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes in videos to help you with your journey from nomorec.com.